All right, hello and welcome to another great sales chat. My name is John Golden from SalesPOP Online Sales Magazine and Pipeliner CRM. I am here in San Diego today, and I'm joined by my colleague Martha Neumeister, who is in Vienna.
Hi, guys.
And today we're delighted to be joined by Maura Schreier-Fleming, who is the president of Best Selling, or Best at Selling, which started in 1997. She works with business and sales professionals to increase productivity in sales, and she's the author of Real World Selling for Out of This World Results. Awesome. So there's going to be an out of this world experience today, Maura, correct?
Yes, of course.
Well, welcome. So today we're going to talk about that age-old conflict between selling on value and selling on price, right? So how do you get out of the price-driven sale and into the value-driven sale? So to start off with, Maura, what is value selling? What do you mean by value selling?
Well, I happen to love the definition that Warren Buffett says. He goes, price is what you buy, value is what you get. And to me, value is what a customer perceives as worth paying more for. So that's what value is. And unfortunately, it's not what salespeople think it is. It's only what the customer thinks it is, because they're the ones that are going to pay for it.
Right. Well, that's a good definition. So how do you then get the customer to perceive the value? Because obviously that's your job as a salesperson, is you need to communicate value. You need to lead them to discovering that value. So how do you go about that?
Well, it actually doesn't start with the salesperson. It starts with management. And it's the management's job to give the value-added sales process to the salespeople. And to me, and I see this in some companies, they don't have a value-added sales process. In other words, they give their salespeople just go sell. And maybe there's some strategic questions that they ask, but it's really not the ones designed to get a customer to understand what the value is. So what they're really doing is the equivalent of putting someone on an assembly line and saying, okay, you go put things together any way you want, when that's crazy. So when you're expecting your salespeople to sell on value, management's job is first to define what that value is. That means you know what the product has to offer or the service has to offer. And maybe you create strategic alliances with the people that are helping you develop your product so that you can then offer that information as part of your sales process. And you have to communicate all of that to the salespeople in a way that they can sell it, which means marketing gets involved. So it starts with management. And then, of course, where you had alluded to, the salesperson takes over. And that's through questioning strategy.
So it sounds to me like what you're saying is that the foundational work needs to be done first. So you can't just suddenly turn around to your salespeople and say, start selling on value. You have to do that. You have to do your homework, in that you have to understand your customers, your target customers. You want to understand their business needs, and then you understand what value your product, service, your organization can bring to them, right?
Well, actually, it's the opposite. You first start with understanding the value you have to offer. And that's where management comes in. And then you look to people, prospects, customers, who could potentially benefit from that value. So not everybody's a prospect.
Sure.
So when you understand what you have to offer, then you look to where it's a good fit.
So how important is it? Because I often come across this, and I'm sometimes still amazed by it, is that a lot of organizations today still have a kind of vague idea who their customer is. They kind of think they know who their target customer is, but they haven't really defined it that tightly.
Oh my God, go home. You know, I say this to people, if you're really going to waste your time, just go to the beach. You know, it doesn't really make sense. Don't kid yourself into thinking, quote, you're selling. It all starts with understanding who, and I call them your ideal prospect. It is so much easier to sell to someone who is most likely to need or want what you have to offer. Why would you be knocking your head against the wall trying to change somebody's mind when they probably don't need what you want? And I do believe in abundance. There are enough viable prospects out there that you have to be strategic about locating those customers who want and need what you have to offer. And it starts with understanding your ideal prospect. And what I would suggest to every salesperson who is unclear about who their ideal customer is to look back to maybe their last 10 sales, because those are successes, and develop the criteria for looking and analyzing what those customers look like. Was it like location? Was it size of the organization? Was it the size of the sale? Whatever it may be, maybe even gender. I work with companies and I find even within the existing sales team, one person will sell differently. In other words, their ideal prospect is older or younger, different gender, doesn't matter. But you have to look at your business and your successes and what are the criteria and see which ones are yeses or nos. And you can very clearly identify when you see a whole lot of yeses and sales, that's a valuable quality of an ideal prospect. And you can very clearly define who an ideal prospect is by looking at your successes, because unless you're going to change something about your products, your services, yourself, your process, it is ridiculous to expect to get different results.
But let's be honest, I mean, some salespeople and sales management, they feel more comfortable stuffing their pipeline with lots of prospects, even if they're junk. So how do you get people out of that mindset? Because it can be a difficult transition sometimes for organizations, or because you often have to kind of shrink your pipeline when you focus on quality, right? Now, the results down the road will be better, but you have to go through. But you have to go through that period of kind of having the nerve, if you like, or the guts, if you like, to go through that period of looking at your and maybe a smaller pipeline.
First of all, your first question, which is, how do you let that happen? That's management's responsibility. If management allows junk, and I go to a lot of sales meetings, and I have many times had to tell management, you're getting sold. When I hear week after week, the deal is going to close, and it never closes, and I will tell the manager it's not going to close because it's not anywhere remotely close to being an ideal prospect. And that's one of the first things we'll work on, is we will define what makes an ideal prospect. And then it is management's job to question. So tell me, how does this particular prospect fit in? And this is not to say, and you can imagine like a bullseye. Not everyone is going to be the bullseye, the center, the target.
Sure.
But I will be realistic. If somebody, and that's an A prospect, that's the bullseye. A B is maybe not quite as large, maybe doesn't have as high probability of purchasing within the next couple of months, and a C is maybe a longer term prospect. But there's no way a C is magically going to become an A, and there's no way that a D belongs in anybody's pipeline.
Right.
So I hold management accountable, and they have to develop the vocabulary, because their sales meetings are a waste of time if you're going to talk about and listen, well, this deal's going to close, that deal's going to close. No, it starts with, when you define a prospect, tell me, are they A, B, and C? What are your criteria and why? And everyone is talking from the same dictionary, and nobody's getting conned.
And I think you've just touched on a very important point here, and that's a common language and a common understanding between management and salespeople and marketing people, but a common understanding of who your prospect is, a common understanding of, as you say, what's an ABC account or whatever you choose to call it. But if you can get that common understanding, that common language, obviously then you have the foundation for success, correct?
Yes, because you know what? Salespeople, their job is to sell. One of their most important customers is their manager. So if they're selling their manager on junk and the manager is buying junk, guess what the manager is going to continue to get? Junk. So I encourage management to have this very realistic conversation. Everyone's on the same page. Everybody's working harder for accomplishing an objective that they are more likely to achieve. And then you don't get the junk anymore.
Yeah. Okay. So say you've got management aligned, all of that good stuff. What are some of the common obstacles that salespeople face when they try to move into value selling?
It's kind of a funny one, but it's kind of a nice one because it's easily modified. Here's what happens. the mistake is that salespeople present too soon. They go into the sales call and they're asking a couple of questions, and then they hear a customer say something that triggers in the salesperson's mind, oh, they need what I have to sell, and they immediately present. But you see, that's too soon, because the customer is ready to buy only when they realize they have a problem, they realize that it's a very important problem, and they realize that the pain of staying with their problem is so great that they have got to do something about it. And you see, when you present too soon, the customer hasn't gone through all of that mental exercise and emotional exercise to feel the pain. And so you typically hear, well, I'll think about it. They're not thinking about it. That's blowing a salesperson off.
Yeah. I think that's a key point as well. Is that often, as you say, salespeople, when they hear the first issue come up and they think, "Oh, I can fix that," they jump in rather than taking a moment to say, "Well, it may be an issue, but it may be an issue that they can live with." Let's face it, there are lots of things in any organization that we think, oh, you'd love to fix that, but something, it's not a priority and I can live with it.
Right.
And if you go off down that rabbit hole immediately, then you may have blown your best shot, because if you'd have waited a little bit, the bigger issues come up. So basically what you're saying is, it's all about the salesperson having the confidence and the patience to explore with the prospect the issues and figure out which are the ones that really have some urgency behind them, or where you can create some urgency.
It's that, and I would say the key element of value-added selling is being able to quantify the customer's problem or the prospect's problem. The universal language of business is numbers. Dollars, or sure. whatever currency you're in, wherever we are in the world. People understand numbers. When you're talking about a $1 million problem, a $500,000 problem, whatever currency, that is very, very clear. And then when you say to somebody, to a prospect, is that important for you to solve? And if they say yes, you now have a reason to go present. What I do say, though, is in the sales conversation, really strategically, it's much better to find 3 important issues that you can quantify, because you may find that one is far more urgent than the other 2, and at least you can get started on something. So quantify it first, establish that it's important for that particular prospect to resolve, because they may not care about somebody else's department, they only care about their own. So find out that it's important, quantify it, and then you do and you can present your solution.
No, that's good advice, because I think often, people get a little kind of uni-focused. So as you say, they may see one issue that, wants to be solved. It's a bit like, people going on a sales call with only one outcome in mind, right? You rarely get the absolute 100% outcome that you're looking for, so you need to have some alternative outcomes as well, where you're still moving the sale forward.
Yes, and I advise salespeople, when you're in this dialogue with a prospect, most of the time I know we have computers now, but still most of the time it's taking notes by hand. When I hear an issue, I will circle that one, and I will circle on my paper enough places to know when I've hit a couple, and then I'll dive deeper into them. That's where I'm working to quantify. So if I see I've got 3 circles and I'm developing some data, and the way to develop data is tell me how often that happens, what's an hourly cost for your downtime, or what's an hour worth, what's your staff worth, you ask all those questions. And sometimes customers will say, they'll be thinking. It's very important for the salesperson, just be quiet, let them think. And if you sense that they're stumped, then you can say, well, just do your best guess. It's close enough for horseshoes, but don't answer for a customer, and give them time to think. You'll get the information.
Yeah, I think you've hit on another critical point here, and this is something that I notice a lot too, is that, and I think it's getting worse because it's culturally culturally, it's getting worse. This idea of being comfortable with some silence, right? You'll often find, when a salesperson is speaking to a prospect, and as you say, you give them some information, you provoke a thought or whatever, that you have to have the confidence to let some silence exist for the person to actually, the prospect, to think about what you've just suggested or whatever. But there is a tendency to fill the silence, right? Because the silence feels awkward. So how do you help salespeople with that? Because I think that's becoming a cultural phenomenon too, where people are afraid of silence. It's like, I haven't text back immediately. There's a gap.
Well, and you've gotten to another area which I really have a hot button about, which is when salespeople make themselves crazy by assuming they have to be working 24/7. No, you don't. But the answer about silence is this. There are more assertive people and there are less assertive people. The people that tend to be less comfortable with silence are those more assertive people, the fast talkers, the loud talkers, somebody like me. And what you have to do is just train yourself, just close your mouth and bite your tongue, just keep it closed. Because you cannot interrupt, it's rude, and it stops the flow of conversation. And what I didn't say is this: there are some customers, the quiet, thoughtful, methodical customers, their brains work by processing. And if we jump in, we're breaking their chain of thought, and they don't like it. It's very disruptive for them, and it really breaks rapport, which is the foundation of selling, this ability to relate to people. So why would we make our job harder than it needs to be? So listening has to be the primary skill that salespeople have, and they just have to practice it. Going into a meeting and saying, if someone else starts to talk, I'm going to stop. Excuse me, go ahead, like that. And listen for the pause that signifies that the person's done speaking, and then go on from there. That's kind of how you have to do it.
Yeah. No, and absolutely, I agree. It's a learned skill.
Yes.
It's a learned skill, not just in work, in the rest of your life too. Yeah. I'm sure all of the significant others and friends would all love for people to learn how to listen a little better. So what are some of the things when a salesperson kind of really starts to stand out as a value-driven salesperson, what are some of the traits or characteristics that they display?
One of the keys that I look for is, I will say, show me your testimonial letters from your customers. And I will say this too. I also advise salespeople to write their own testimonial letters. And I'll explain what I mean by that. But if your products and services, and you are such a wonderful salesperson and your products are so great, customers should be talking about them. They should be saying wonderful things. And actually, they should be saying the same things that you would like to say about your products and services, but they're saying them. They're unbiased. They have nothing to gain. It's far more persuasive because it's more credible. So those testimonial letters are the work of salespeople. Salespeople, built into their value-added sales process, after an interval of time has occurred where the customer can be experiencing the value, and the salesperson asks the customer, tell me how my work or my product has improved or impacted your organization, your team, whatever it may be. And then they listen to the customer and they take notes. And then they're asking specifically, so did that reduce downtime? Did that increase employee retention? What was the specific results? And quantify what that's worth. And then you say to a customer, so if I take everything you've told me and put it in a letter, can I send it to you? Because I use testimonial letters to sell. Can I send that to you? And please feel free to make any changes that you want and just send it back to me on your letterhead. And then you get these letters that are basically 99% exactly what you wrote, because people do not like to write. They do not have the time to change, but it's simply cut, paste, put it in print. And you get these letters that, as you're talking to a future prospect, you say, I mentioned that my sales training is very effective and it produces immediate results. Would you like to see what my customers say about my work? And then you get the letter out. It becomes believable. So when you're asking a prospect to pay more, now you have proof. Anything on paper is proof. And it's fact. Far more credible than if you say it yourself. That's how a value-added salesperson sells.
No, I love it. Okay, so how about the scenario where you have a prospect and they just are stuck on price? I mean, they just keep coming back to the price, or they won't let you they won't let you progress without sort of addressing a price issue.
Sure.
How do you deal with that?
Well, there's a couple of scenarios where price enters into the picture. Let's say they love what you have and they're not, willing to pay the price. I want salespeople to recognize the only response is, well, I'm glad you really do want what I have to sell. So what do you want me to take away so we can get to a lower price? Because value is higher priced and you can't give it away for nothing. Now, of course, there are all sorts of negotiating points that you can go for longer term, go for a bigger order, but you have to understand, if you're giving something, by golly, you better get something for it. So when that happens, you trigger your brain either to say, what do you want me to take away? Or let's talk about some other things. Maybe you can get me another piece of business. Maybe, you understand. So, but then again, some people are not value buyers. And
right.
Go back to your ideal customer. Are we trying to turn the D into an A? And if we are, we're kidding ourselves. And if it's at that point, whoa, you wasted so much time.
And I think that's another key point there that you've touched upon, and it's wasting time, right? I think often we don't spend enough time kind of calculating the cost to us of spending time on prospects or leads that are not the right fit, right?
Yes.
I mean, there's a real economic cost to the organization of that.
It's a cost in time. It's a cost in motivation. I mean, think about it. If you spent every day calling on D prospects and hearing no, and whatever else salespeople hear, which is not positive, that is really demotivating. And I don't know anybody who could withstand every day getting knocked over the head. It is not productive. So, and really, the management's job is to call salespeople on that. Wait a second, I don't want you to suffer. I want you to succeed. It is management's job to make salespeople provide the path with fewer obstacles so that they can be successful.
So when you obviously do work, I mean, you spend a lot of time, I presume, with the sales management, because any initiative involving sales lives or dies with the sales manager. That's just the reality, because salespeople take their lead and their cues. So if they say, oh yeah, value-driven selling, that's the initiative du jour, my manager doesn't care about it. So what kind of work do you do with managers to get them, not just, you can get their buy-in, but get their long-term commitment to it?
Well, just like I say, I make it easier for salespeople to sell. I make it easier for managers to manage because they need that process. They need that language. And we work through who is an A prospect, what are the criteria, who's a B, who's a C. And I get them that template for what they need to work through. And so they don't have to do it themselves. And it's a sales meeting. That's one of the items on the agenda. And we work through it. And then everyone leaves the meeting on the same page. What a concept.
So it's all about, I guess at the end of the day, what you're saying, it's all about predictability and repeatability, right? And, sticking to the right prospects and the right way of approaching them. Yeah. Yeah.
It's setting realistic expectations. Look, you and I are in sales long enough to know that it doesn't happen the way we would love it to happen every single day. But my objective is to put everything on my side of the table to enhance the odds that it will be more successful as opposed to less successful. So there are a couple things, call on more ideal prospects, be improving your skills, looking at your existing business. And, this is another one which we haven't talked about, but good salespeople learn from other good salespeople.
Right.
One of my successful distributors, his salespeople worked straight commission. If they were not in their own territories, they were making zero money. And one day a month, each one would go to the other person's territory, critique their business, go on sales calls. The person whose business it was would set the objective for the sales call, tell them what we were trying to accomplish, and then after, how did I do? What did you think? What would you have done differently? And then one day a month, the other salesperson would go to the other one's sales territory and do the same thing. And these were two great salespeople, and I have never seen that done in any other organization. Isn't that interesting?
No, that's a fantastic thing. I've never heard of people actually salespeople going on calls with other people like that. I mean, I've heard people doing like reviews of each other's opportunities, but that's great. That's a fantastic idea.
Real world.
Exact real world. That's fantastic. Okay, well, we're bumping up against the end of our sales chat here, and we want to give you two things. One is we always like to ask our guests your power tip. Okay, what do you, Maura, do every day to set yourself up for success?
Well, every day, I don't do it every single day because it doesn't come up every single day. But getting testimonials, building into your sales process this follow-up piece to find out the results of your work, that will make you more successful. Because what happens is when you're selling, you get these selling tools. It's proof of performance. Everyone knows when a salesperson says wonderful things about our stuff that we have something to gain, which is the sale. But when another customer who has nothing to gain says wonderful things about us, it makes the sale so much easier. And I'm all for making selling easier. It doesn't need to be harder. So.
It's hard enough as it is. Yeah, exactly.
It's hard enough as it is, and it's fun enough as it is.
Okay. So just in the last couple of moments, just tell the audience a little bit more about you and how they can contact you.
Well, they can reach me at my phone number, which is 972-380-0200. And my email is Maura, M-A-U-R-A, @ and the words best @selling.com. I work with salespeople on their skills and their strategies, which are questioning strategies, developing ideal prospect strategies. And once you have those sorts of templates in place, then you can go sell, and we can debrief after the fact. We set objectives for each sales call, questioning strategy. Questions guide your customers to understand why they should buy, and it takes you off the hook because they're doing the talking. So it's what I say, my work is more brain, less mouth selling.
I love it. More brain, less mouth. That's a good that's good advice. That goes well beyond sales. All right. Well, listen. Thanks again, Maura. Thank you, Martha and Vienna, for keeping everything running smoothly. This is John Golden, another sales chat in the can. SalesPOP Online Sales Magazine and Pipeliner CRM, and we'll see you for another sales chat real soon. Thank you.